Welcome to the Gals Guide to the Galaxy podcast, where a group of gals gather for you one cool thing around our topic of the month. Is it ancient history? Is it breaking news? Is it safe for work? Well, that's up to each gal. All we know is that...
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Welcome back. I'm Leah, and I am joined by Bonnie and Katie and Kira, and we are talking about our one cool medical thing. So Bonnie already talked about her Mency cup, and Katie already talked about Lillian Wald, and Kira already talked about Virginia Apgar. But before we dive back in, let's get to know something random about our gal pals. So what I want to know for my random question is... what do you feel is the most important thing you have done for your own health? Because we have talked a lot so far about taking care of others. Yeah. But what about taking care of ourselves, which I'm sure is hard?
I've made contracts with people.
Oh, accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Accountability to get myself to the doctor.
Cool.
For my mammogram. For my annual checkup.
Right.
For the dentist. I mean, all of those things.
All the things we avoid.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'll make
I'm with
sure
you.
the boys get to the dentist, but, you know, I can wait.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So that's, I think, the most important thing I've done for my...
is accountability.
Yeah.
Because it takes a village.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant idea because
Yeah.
I avoid.
Yeah, me
See.
too. And
Yeah.
that's why my mother-in-law and I made a deal. She was going to go see the doctor about one thing. I was going to go about something else. And now I have someone at work who we have a deal about when we're going to have.
Yeah. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
See. I like it. Katie, what is yours?
That's a tough one.
I know. It is actually a tough
I have
one.
lots of grand plans in my head about things I'm going to do to improve my health.
Right.
Maybe a little less follow through on those things.
It happens.
Might. I think overall the most lasting change I've made recently is basically eating less meat.
Yeah.
I feel more energetic. I feel better about it. It's made me really happy. My fiance is vegan, and so every evening I make a vegan meal, and
Nice.
I love cooking.
Yes. Oh, and you're brilliant at it.
Thank you.
Like award winning in my head. Have I not given you 50 million awards?
Well, I have to say, like, I had fallen into quite a mentality of kind of the stereotypical dinner as a meat, maybe a veggie,
As the
definitely
centerpiece.
a starch or carb. And yeah, absolutely. And this has really challenged me to get to know vegetables and cook more vegetables.
Yeah.
And it just feels really good. So I'm hoping my next goal is to eat vegan for breakfast and lunch as well. And
you
then
go.
I think I did that for about 2 months and I felt so energetic. So I think for my health, that would be a big improvement. So
See.
I'll check back in with you guys later and we'll see.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. What about you, Leah?
Well, Bonnie, what about yours?
I was trying to let Bonnie have time.
I know, but
Come on.
I go last because it's my one cool thing.
Oh, is that a rule? Do we have
Yes.
rules?
We have a few rules, and
Okay.
we throw them all out. Generally, like there is no
All right.
rules.
Bonnie, are you ready? Because Leah can go. I
Otherwise-
have no
Otherwise,
rules.
I can go. Katie said it. Katie said I want to.
You know, young, healthy person as far as I know.
I know. Keep knocking on
just-
stuff.
Gross.
Going to the doctor. I haven't gone to the dentist in a long time, and I need to go to the dentist. But just going to the doctor, a regular appointment,
Sweet.
making sure everything's okay. I mean, you got to make sure, you know, like mental health too. Like take
Yes.
a
Oh,
mental
yeah.
health day if you
That's
need
Right.
one.
a great one.
Like I feel like it's a big thing that, especially as women, we got to take care of everyone else. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these
Sometimes the
days-
tank is empty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And these days, with the way the world is, it's...
It gets you down.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, Bonnie, because when I looked through the script when Leah emailed it, my first thought was the best thing I've ever done for my health is go to a counselor.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
But I totally blanked it tonight. But yeah, that
Yes.
did
Katie
so
would
much
like
for me.
to change her answer. Her answer is now a counselor.
No, I have two answers.
Brilliant. Is it a vegan counselor? I'm just kidding.
You know
Vegan
what's
counselor would
really
be
hard?
Amazing.
You know what's really hard to find in the Bible Belt?
What?
A counselor that has no religious affiliation.
Oh, preach.
Like every
Yes.
counseling office is like,
Yes.
we're a Christian counseling office. I'm like,
Mhm.
why?
I know.
Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh my gosh.
it's a real problem.
I'm not into it, man.
Yeah.
I went
Is
to
Jesus the answer to everything?
apparently.
There-
For some
The
people.
thing
gonna
that cracked
pass.
me up was that we went to Josh and I years ago, went to marriage counseling. It was that 7-year itch thing, and the baby was 2. I mean, it was horrible. Don't have a baby turn 2 during your 7-year itch marriage. It's the worst. So we went into counseling, like you should do. And she's like, well, you know the story of Ruth in the Bible. I'm like, honey, I'm Buddhist. I am she was using references of what we should do that were, and I'm like, I finished your questionnaire that said not Christian. Look, so in other words, I didn't know her references. We were speaking different things. So there's the religion, and then there's basing your whole therapy session around.
Right.
Well, and maybe
It's
I'm a
sorry.
giant bitch, but it could be. But I've been to counseling offices where they're like, if you're not religious, that's no problem.
Right.
Just let us know.
Yeah.
And the counselors honored that. But when you're sitting in an office and everything's like an inspirational Jesus quote, and you're like, that doesn't do it for me. That's
Right.
Yeah.
that's not where my head's at. And,
And it's one thing, in my first marriage, when I went to a Christian theological seminary for counseling.
Oh, yes. Right.
But no.
Because you know that
These are
going
just
in, this
private
is the place you're
practices.
going to.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right, is it me?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. The most important thing that I have done for my own health. You know what? I'm just I thought of variety of different things. Right now I'm doing keto and I'm trying to work on my blood sugars and I'm trying to figure out that stuff. I went vegan for a year and I freaking loved it, and I actually miss it because I'm eating nothing but meat and cheese and it's kind of making my soul hurt a little bit. But I'm gonna find a way to blend it and get back. I think the best thing that I've ever done for my own health is journal, though. I think it's journal. Because I do it when I'm happy, and I do it when I'm sad, and I do it when I'm frustrated, and it's an outlet for me. And it's really helped because sometimes I'll be working the same problem, over and over again. But journaling allows me to look back and be like, okay, but what did I come to before? You know what I mean? Was I close to anything, or was it bullshit before? And then it's okay, so this is what I thought last time. I've now think it's this, or just working something out, but having that, writing it down, I think. And it also, for me, it's the physical activity too. It's not typing for me that doesn't do it. I have to physically, if I'm angry, it's big. If I'm really depressed, it's small. It just has to physically express itself somehow. I think that, along with listening to music, because I will have the mental health days where it's dude, I am journaling like a son of a bitch and listening to Nirvana all day. So deal.
that sounds perfect. I'm calling into work tomorrow.
It's
You're
a pretty-
giving me my day.
It's a pretty dark day, but it usually ends up looking a lot lighter by the end of the day. But that I started really early on. That was my outlet, and it's something that's kind of got me all the way through, and it's allowed me to kind of look back and be like, you know what? Maybe it's time to talk to a counselor. Maybe it's something more that it's medical and not just a series of bad days. So I think that's the way I kind of keep myself
That's
accountable.
awesome.
Yeah.
Journaling.
Don't you think that's something that should be
Taught
in school?
yes. Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah.
promoted? That, along with
Yeah.
what we're talking about, caring for yourself.
Exactly. I think just getting your thoughts out. And even if you're not, I love journaling because it's private and I'm not interrupting anybody. I can do it at a Starbucks if I want to. But some people are also a lot more verbal. So even talking out your feelings to yourself if you need to, you know what I mean? You know how we all have the car concert? You know what I'm talking about? Just talking your problems out in the car to yourself. So whether it's verbal or nonverbal, I think teaching work out your own shit is crucial.
Do you guys want to hear something awesome?
Yes.
Yeah.
Always.
So I know that Leah always talks about how I'm a vocational services manager.
Yeah, you are.
I have a program for my kids to learn vocational skills, but also life skills, and I make them journal 3 times a week.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I
That's
provide
awesome.
prompts every day. It's actually
Nice.
become a student job, and they provide prompts. So it's not always like
perfect.
super in depth. Sometimes they're fun. Sometimes they're job related.
You need a mix, though.
They're a difference, yeah, but still having them have that experience of writing down, responding to the prompt, and all that. So
Look
That's
at you.
awesome.
Changing the world, Katie. I love it.
yeah,
Because that is one thing that we hadn't talked about in regards to women in medicine is
Right.
mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people need to be we all need to be thinking of it
Yes.
as part of health.
yeah,
Right.
medicine.
Yeah.
Exactly. We need universal medical health or mental health as well.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking to somebody and I'm like, well, where's your nearest, like mental health clinic? And they're like, I'm sorry, what? And I'm like, oh no. Crap. It was a thing. Oh no. Well, do you guys want to hear about my one cool thing?
Yeah.
Oh, my one cool thing. So my gal, she wasn't a doctor. She wasn't a nurse. She didn't even run a science lab. But because of her, we have the polio vaccine. We have cancer treatments. Because of her, we have scientists who have been able to do studies on radiation effects on human beings, and also sensitivity to cosmetic items and like household stuff. Like, does it hurt us? Because of her, we've been able to test that stuff. Because of her cells, they have been used in 74,000 studies for 68 years.
Wow.
So my one cool
It's a
thing.
legacy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My one cool thing is Henrietta Lacks and her immortal cells that have lived on for 68 years. Now, there's a book and a movie. Have you guys seen or read either of them? Just curious.
There's a movie.
I didn't know there was
Oprah's-
a movie either.
Oh, Oprah's
I've
in
read
it.
the book. That's
Gotcha.
amazing.
Yes.
Guess what I'm watching tomorrow.
Yes. I think I saw it on HBO. So I don't know
Okay.
if it was like an HBO brought to you
Yeah.
or it just so happened to premiere on HBO. But it is the same as the book title, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks.
Yeah.
And it's got Oprah
The
Winfrey.
book was so fascinating and so
Yes.
infuriating. And
Right.
I loved it.
Exactly. And we have it in the library too.
Yes.
So, which is amazing. Kira, have you heard of her? Saw
I-
the book, movie?
I have not read the book or
Gotcha.
seen the movie.
Gotcha.
But I have heard about her
Sweet.
through some of my podcasts, and at least
There you go.
at least two, I think.
Oh, nice. There you
So-
go. Well, hopefully I'll be able to shed even more light
Yes.
on both. So I'm just going to say that I'm really glad that her cells have saved so many lives because her life was really shitty. It was hard. It was really, really hard. I don't want to like sugarcoat it. I'm like, oh no, it was great. Oh man. So she was born in Virginia in 1920. And when she was 4, her mother died. And her mother, her name was Eliza. She died giving birth to her 10th child.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. So Henrietta and her siblings would have to then go stay with various relatives throughout Virginia. Henrietta would spend a large amount of her time with her grandfather in a log cabin that was once slave quarters on a plantation in her family's ancestry. So in other words, in her ancestry, her family were slaves with that cabin. And then the cabin was willed to them as free persons, but you're still living in it. Like that's
Yeah.
that's a load. Yes. So, but also in this cabin, she would meet her future husband, David Day Lax. And they call him Day Lax, which confused me a lot in research. And they're like, so Day Lax. And I'm like, what day are we talking about? What's going on? His nickname was Day. So Henrietta, she started working at a very young age, and she worked alongside her family as a tobacco farmer, right? Back-breaking work, working as a tobacco farmer. When she was 14, she gave birth to her first child. Yes. So 4 years later, she would give birth to a daughter. So then 2 years after those two children, she and Day got married. They did it just a different way.
Okay.
I don't want to say backwards because there's no wrong way to do it. But they
Right.
decided, let's just have 2 kids first and then we'll see about this whole marriage thing. That's fine.
I mean, parenting changes your relationship.
It
and
really
you might
does.
as well
It
just
does.
Exactly.
figure that parenting shit out and then decide if it's going to be a long-term thing. No, wait.
Right. Well, like Josh wanted to live together for 5 years before we got married, had kids, stuff like that. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe Day had the same plan. But actually, in 1941, things started looking up. I like that I have like one little like ray of sunshine. The couple moved to Maryland thanks to a family friend, and they found a job working in a steel plant. And they bought a tiny little house in the Turner Station in Baltimore County. Now, it's actually one of the oldest and largest African-American communities in that area. So think of kind of like Harlem Renaissance, you know what I mean, if you will. So a very up-and-coming neighborhood, a very safe neighborhood, and owning a house, you know, from growing up as a tobacco farmer was like really, really cool. So they had 3 more kids. And her last one was delivered at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. Now, Johns Hopkins, I did not know this, was one of the few hospitals that would actually treat African Americans. So we're still talking about this time around 1941 to 1951 where African Americans were not even treated in hospitals. What the hell? So, however, 4 months after giving birth, she would be back at the hospital because she felt a knot in her womb. And she wanted to have it checked out. Now, Henrietta's doctor was Howard W. Jones, and he took a biopsy on a mass that was on her cervix for testing to try to figure out what this was. And 2 discoveries were found. Number 1 was that Henrietta had cervical cancer. Very unfortunate. Number 2, there was something different with her cells when they looked at them underneath the microscope. But I will come back to her cells. Henrietta was treated with radium tube inserts.
Ooh.
Oh.
That has to be horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like radium and then tube and then insert. Like all 3 words are horrible.
They're all making me cringe.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And then more tissue samples were taken without her permission and without her knowledge as well while she was getting treatments. In August, Henrietta Lacks returned to Johns Hopkins for routine treatment. This was just something she was going through for her cancer. This appointment turned into a 2-month stay where her health just rapidly declined, just like out of nowhere. She only had her cancer for 10 months that she was aware of. She had her baby, and then 10 months later, on October 4th, 1951, she passed away. It was very, very fast. She was only 31 years old, too. Wow. So that's why I don't have like a whole bunch of history about her, because she was only 31. I mean, she was a baby.
Yeah.
But her cancer had metastasized throughout her entire body in that short time, which is like unheard of that it's that fast.
Even with the radiation treatment.
Even with the horrible radiation treatment, it still was that fast. Yeah. She was buried in an unmarked grave for actually several years in her family cemetery in Laxtown. So Henrietta Lacks, Laxtown, it is their namesake town, actually. Yeah. A headstone is now there. Thanks to the family, thanks to friends, and thanks to George Gay, who I will talk about in a second as well. So she does now have a headstone, but for decades, she did not have one. So it's like, what? Okay, so now I will shift to about her cells, because that is the sadness of her life. But her cells are a completely different story. But I wanted to start about her because what happens next is always to remember that Henrietta was a living, breathing person. A lot of people start talking about her cells and they kind of make her an object. They make her an it. You know what I mean? And it's like, hold on, she's still a person. So yeah, and it's like it's a bother of mine when you turn any person into an object. It's like, no, I don't like this. But also it's very important to her family too, to notice, you know, the patient first. So George Gay worked in a tissue lab at Johns Hopkins. Okay. And he was actually, for decades, he was trying to do tests on cells outside the body. Instead of like human subjects or animal subjects, he wanted to basically have a petri dish of cells and be able to do testing. Now, the problem is that cells will replicate in a dish only 40 times before they start dying. So you don't get much testing out of them before they start to deteriorate, collapse, and die. Well, the thing was, Henrietta's cells doubled every 20 hours and never slowed down. So her cells kept rebuilding and replicating and replicating and replicating. They haven't stopped replicating. in 68 years.
Wow.
They're really an anomaly. So what he decided to call them were HeLa cells. So the HE is from Henrietta and the LA is from Lax. So Henrietta Lax. So it's still her name, but everybody refers to them as HeLa cells. And her name kind of got a little bit lost in it after a while. But her cells were sent to tons of different researchers around the country.
You could order them from catalogs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Yes. So I've seen so many credits because of that, because they could send them everywhere of what her cells did. Her cells are the reasons why we have treatments for Parkinson's, for HIV, for HPV, for salmonella, and for some cancers. And many researchers stopped testing on animals, not all of them, but many of them, because they could test on HeLa cells instead. They had a viable replacement to try to figure out stuff. Okay, so the question everybody always wants to know is, why did her cells keep dividing, right? Okay, so this is according to the SciShow, which is on YouTube, that I like to watch. So on the SciShow, she also had HPV, right? The human papillomavirus. So her HPV genome basically combined with her own genome. All right. So this is specifically what they say. It gets a little medical, but I'll read it anyway. The virus, which contained its own cancer genes, took up shop next to one of Lax's oncogenes. Oncogenes are the genes that can cause cancer when they are changed. The HPV turned on the oncogene, which made her body produce a ton of those cancerous cells. Which is why she was so rapidly.
So fast.
It was so fast. Her body just decided, oh, we're just going to make tons of this.
Right.
Throwing it out like party confetti.
Right. Which is great in a lab for duplication,
Yeah.
but it kills a person.
Yeah.
And
right.
fast.
Exactly. And very, very fast. So that's where that, like to me, I thought blessing and curse at the same time. Like, oh my goodness. So the cells saved a whole bunch of people, but it killed one very, very special gal.
Yeah.
Because we've never seen cells do this since, which is really, really amazing. But to add injury to insult, or insult to injury, the family did not know that Henrietta's cells were being collected and used for 20 years. They didn't bother to tell the family at all. I mean, they still had her name on it to a certain extent.
Well, it really brought up a lot of ethics too, of
right.
Who owns this tissue? Is it her
Right.
tissue?
Yeah.
Is it the lab's tissue? Do they own
Is
that?
it public domain?
right?
Because it's in the doctor's, kind
it's
of wheelhouse. Yeah.
From a person's body.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What are the patients' right? Because that was my next question.
Yeah.
How would you guys feel if it was a close family member of yours whose cells were taken without your permission and then saved millions of people?
Right.
How did they find out about it? Did just
A
someone contact
researcher. Wasn't it Rebecca who wrote the book? I thought it
don't
was
know
a
if it was
researcher.
her.
Because Rebecca Sloot, who wrote the book,
Maybe it was her.
she was
I could
investigating.
remember.
She wanted to
Yeah.
figure out the origins of the HeLa,
cells.
and so there was public papers about
Yeah.
them, and the public papers might have said,
I mean, they're freaking
Who?
named after her.
right, exactly, yeah. 'Cause
Even
they'll
if
track
that's
back.
kind of gotten lost, it was there somewhere.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It was kind of pushed to the side, but I think
Yeah.
basically an investigative journalist found out about
Yeah.
it and then started talking
Notified
to the family.
And went to the family and talked about the
Right.
and they had. That's when they found out they had no idea. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the part I
Right.
remember hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I would probably I'd be one of those things where it's yes, I want you to do the test, but I
Right.
need you to tell me. I
Yeah.
just want to
Right.
know
Right.
to be part of the story, or at least to champion it, sort of thing. Where it's the least you didn't have to ask. The least you had to do was just send an awkward letter or something.
Well, and
Right.
this is a tricky subject. I don't know how I would feel here, but I mean, the money made off of her cells became a giant industry. I don't know if it's its own
Right.
industry, but like I said, they were in catalogs that you could order for your laboratory research.
Right.
Somebody was making money off of her biological tissues.
Yeah.
And
And John Hopkins says it wasn't them, but
right, and
but
there you
they were
have
part of that.
how many kids did she have? 5, 6 kids.
She had 5. Yep.
5 kids that don't have a mom anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that could have been her legacy to them.
Right.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the part where it's like,
that's where the issue.
Yeah. And wasn't there some kind of concern they had about, like, with her cells still being out there, it's still, like, part of her, and with, like, her, like, remains or moving on, because she's, like, dead, but her cells are still here.
Right, exactly.
When there's something with that.
There was something with her human genome. So they decided once again, I think it was 2013, as recent as 2013, scientists just decided, well, we have all these cells and we have these human genome projects where we can actually look at somebody's entire DNA chain and figure out what illnesses they have, what made their eyes, blue and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so they decided to do her entire genome. And again, they did not notify the family. Mm-hmm. And they were about to publish, these are what we have found out about Henrietta Lacks' cells. And the family was like, can we just see it first? You know what I mean? Like, just let us know. So they showed it to them like, okay, this is where, this is. And they're like, that's amazing. That's our family history. We know that possibly these, viruses could be activated or whatever. Yeah. And they eventually have now worked with organizations and with Johns Hopkins, but it still was 2013 and they were doing the shit. But yeah, so basically they could clone Henrietta Lacks is what I'm trying to say, because they've sequenced her entire DNA. And I hope somebody asks for permission before they do that.
Right.
But so far.
I mean, if someone asked me, if my dad died 6 years ago, and at the time, if they had said, can we have, parts of his body or his cells,
right, for research,
go ahead, take them.
Right, exactly.
Knowledge. His body was, he always said, take any parts of me that'll be useful.
Right.
And that's the same thing my sister said before she died. Burn the rest, but take whatever you want.
Exactly. Yes. Whatever can be of use to someone else, by all means. Yeah.
At least tell us.
And it was also their wishes as well.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody asked Henrietta.
Well, that's because 1, she was female, and 2, she was of color.
Exactly. Which is like, no! Shouldn't have been the case.
Right. But at the time, it definitely was.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And as far as just up to a couple years ago.
2013.
Still the same
Still
thing.
shouldn't have been.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, her family is extremely proud of everything, that Henrietta's cells have done.
Yeah.
They very much are very, very proud. They encouraged to take part in their I want to say mother, but it's also grandmother and great grandmother's legacy. So they are on the board of the National Institute of Health and of Johns Hopkins as well. And other boards that, like the Human Genome Project and stuff like that. They're just like, oh, okay. But in the book we're talking about came out in 2010, was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and it was published by Rebecca Skloot. She worked really, really hard with Henrietta's daughter, Deborah. And I don't know if you guys know this, Deborah actually died just before the book was published. Oh. Yeah, because in the movie, Oprah's still alive. And I'm like, oh, but Deborah didn't make it. But she knew of the research. She knew what they had found. It was just finishing up the book, you know what I mean? Polishing up the book and getting the information out there. But Deborah is the character that Oprah played in the 2017 movie. But grandchildren Veronica Robinson and David Lacks do have a wonderful TED Talk, by the way, which I will put in the show notes, where they talk about their mission is to change the narrative of fear of going to the doctor. Because especially in the African American community, there is a lot of don't trust doctors.
Yeah.
And geez, I see why. Right. Yeah. But they, even though what has happened to their, mother and great grandmother's cells, they are still like, let's not fear doctors. Let's work with doctors. Let's work with medicine. Let's advocate for patients' rights. And they are very level. They even talk about stories that great-great-grandfathers used to tell them, which is, don't walk around the streets at night in front of Johns Hopkins Hospital. They will kidnap you and do experiments on you.
Oh, wow.
So it has been ingrained in the African-American community to fear hospitals, doctors, medical, like all of it. Yeah. And it's like, no. Let's change that narrative. And so that is their mission, what they very much fight for, which I'm like, wow, that's some work to get there. That's some therapy that they went through. to be like, no, we can do this better. And I'm like, wow.
It's amazing.
Exactly. Do you guys have any like fear or mistrust of doctors? I mean, not like on John Hopkins
yeah.
kidnap you. Like, oh, now you do.
No, I always have.
There you go.
You don't spend a summer in the hospital as a kid, and
Right?
Yeah.
And be like,
Embrace
doctors are
it.
great. They took care of everything.
Not pleasant associations.
That's fair. You saw it firsthand.
Yeah. Plus,
See.
you read too many things about mess ups, and the story I was telling you about getting all the way to blood poisoning before I got
Right.
medication.
Uh-huh.
No.
How far do we need to take this?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm not big on going to the doctor. I took Jonah for the first time in 2 years.
He was healthy.
Last month, he was doing fine.
He didn't break any bones.
And like seriously, we're in the waiting room, and I'm like, we're gonna get sick here.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna get ill.
Yeah.
This
That
is
is
gonna
the
be
place-
pointless.
that's
It's
the
gonna
point
be a
you get
never-ending cycle. But he had an ear infection, and we got it taken care of. So
There you go.
You know.
See.
I guess you can trust him sometimes.
Sometimes. Exactly.
One time I went to the med check because I thought I had what was it? It's not mono, strep throat for the second time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I had it when I was in high school, and I had it again in like college. No, it was either right after college or at the end of college.
Yeah.
And my mom had looked down my throat, and she saw a bunch of white stuff, and she was like, "Oh, you got strep again." So
Right.
I had the next day off work, so I went to the med check and went to the lady, and she was like, "Well, what are you here for?" And I'm like, "Well, I think I have strep throat."
Mm-hmm.
She was like, "Well, why do you think that?" And I'm like, "Well, I've had it before, and there was white stuff in my throat before." And Mom said, "There's white stuff again."
Right.
She's, "Well, is your mom a medical professional?"
Just say yes.
And I was like, "No." She's like, "Well, most of the time it's just an ear infection." And
Cool.
she's like doing all this stuff, and she's like, "But we can do the strep throat test if you want." I'm like, "I'm here. Let's
why-
do it.
That's why you're
Like,
there.
let's go." And she's like, "Well, you know, it's a thing down your throat." I'm like, "I know. I've had it before. Like, just do it."
Wow.
She didn't. She's, "Oh, well, it is strep throat." I wanted to be like, and my mom's not even a medical professional.
I told you. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, do you have a fear or mistrust of doctors?
You know, it kind of comes and goes. It depends on the doctor.
Gotcha. That's fair.
Because as a kid, I used to get strep throat every season change, so twice a year.
Yay.
And it was at the point where my mom would call the pediatrician and say she's got it again,
Right.
and he'd just call in the prescription.
fair.
So I really liked that doctor. you know?
It
He
was
made
much
me
easier.
feel better.
Exactly.
But yeah, there's been enough times that it's like I've been in. It's the doctor will go, "Oh, I don't know what's going on," or there are doctors who won't say they don't know
Right. Exactly.
and
yeah.
make up. Feels like they're making up things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there are times when I feel like, do I really trust you? And I'll tell you what, working with medical records,
Yeah.
there are certainly different care facilities that I would say, you probably don't want to go there.
Right. Exactly. Quality
And-
of care is perhaps
Yeah.
different.
Can that be in the
place to
show
place.
notes?
Well, and then I have part of my job is figuring out the physician's signature.
Right. Oh, good luck. Yeah.
I'm like, if they can't take the time to write out, we say print name here, sign here, and sometimes they'll sign
Right.
and it's like, how am I supposed to know who this is?
Who was it? Yeah.
This is why when I went to my doctor the other day, she has dictation that she has somebody live
Right.
that she turns it on and she says, okay, are you there? Here are the notes. And she says reads the notes to them, and they're dictated right there. If he has
Oh,
any
nice.
questions about what's going on,
Right.
or what she said, he can stop and ask.
Yeah.
And so she doesn't have to take any notes anymore.
And it's digital that way
And
as
it's
well.
digital, yeah. I mean, I've had also the point where they follow the doctor around with the little computer that they'll type the notes in. But
Yep.
this is even better. I'm like,
Right.
cool. Because I wouldn't trust their handwriting.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. There's just so many errors that can happen in that.
Prescriptions? Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to work for attorneys, too. So I have seen bad handwriting.
See, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I would definitely say I don't think any of this is intentional. Like,
Right.
I don't think anybody would get in a medical profession if they meant ill will to anyone.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about systems that become bigger and bigger and things become more impersonal, you're going to find more errors and mistakes.
Right. And that's why it's important
more
to
what
fight
I'm
for
saying
it.
there. And that's
Yeah.
why it's important to find somebody you're comfortable with, that you trust.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
nowadays. There's still some people that like don't want to treat people because they're, a different race, or there's people that don't want to treat LGBTQ people or
Right.
transgender people. Like back in the day, that the guy of, I don't know, OBGYN or whatever, the father of whatever,
Right.
he was a dick.
Oh, really?
Like he was
Aw.
just torturing women and
Not
sterilizing them without their consent. And
Oh, great.
like
Another
I
one.
feel like he was in it. I mean, he wanted to do great things for medicine, but he had no problem.
yeah,
Hurting
there's
people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
trying to end on a cheerful note, but thanks, Bonnie. No.
Things with the
Well, you know how they
rundown
say
history rate.
people that are surgeons have to have like some kind of psychopathic tendencies that they want to chop through
dentists.
people's.
It's like an
flesh.
ego, right? It's I call it it's almost a God principle. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there, you need to believe that you can. If Mother Nature is trying to take this human being from the earth, you need to have a God complex to be able to take them back and make them mortal and live again. But you know what? You need that element. The problem is it can go real far.
Right. And there are a lot of doctors that, and there's some training that really does put a lot more talking to the patients and listening.
Right. Bedside
And-
manner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not just Western medicine, but looking at
The whole body,
the whole body holistically.
which I like a lot more.
Yeah. But unfortunately, also as organizations or small practices go into larger corporations,
Right.
it
The
becomes about
overhead.
money.
Yeah. It is a business at the end of
Yeah.
the day. Yeah.
So that's why I'm hopeful for, care,
Universal health care.
universal
Yeah.
health care.
Oh, it'd be lovely.
Because
Yeah.
it really, I think, can make a difference about seeing
Yep.
people as people, because you're not scheduling, you have 15 minutes to talk to this person, period.
Exactly.
You know?
And it's not, do I even have money to go to the doctor this
right.
month?
Right.
Because which is a big part of the equation now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of factors to get through.
Yeah. Okay, but let's get, on that positive note.
Yes.
Exactly. I love it. Well, do you want me to wrap it up?
Sure.
Yeah, let's get there.
Exactly. Well, that wraps it up for Medicine Month. We wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we hope to see you at Starbase Indy this weekend, where we have 3 fun-filled days talking about female inventors and scientists. Gals Guide is taking the month of December off for a little R&R before returning full steam in January. So the podcast will be back January 6th, and our research theme is First Ladies. That's right. So the first month of 2020 will be First Ladies. This is going to be a ton of fun. So we are also working on a new Friday podcast show as well. So dun, 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 dun. So from all of us gal pals near and far, we wish you a happy holidays and a trip to the bar. So spread some holiday cheer, because we're going to be talking to you next year. For show notes, links, and images from this week's show, visit galsguide.org. Want exclusive stuff like deleted bits and major bloopers? Become a Gals Guide patron today. Thanks for listening.